this idea that on your darkest day, whatever that looks like for you, that a very small gesture of kindness might be the thing that gets you through that day when maybe you thought you couldn't. We're not saying it has to be this big thing where you join an organisation to do it, but let's just do more of it.
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora! Welcome to another episode of Down to Earth Conversations with me, your host, Andy Dixon. Thanks for joining me for another conversation with another ordinary person who is doing good in the world, making it just a little bit more like heaven. Today's guest is Katy Rowden, who is the General Manager of Good Bitches Baking, a small charity here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, with a big impact in the lives of so many through the art of baking. We talk about how the organisation started, how it got its name and why they're sticking with it, how they are using baking as a vehicle to share kindness, and how that kindness actually breeds more kindness. We hear some of the feedback that their good bitches have received in thanks for their baking, and we see that one simple act can make an enormous difference in someone else's life. I hope this inspires you to see how you can use who you are and what you do to share kindness and goodness with the world. This is episode 68 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's Katy Rowden. I'm here today with Katy Rowden. Katy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
And nor here, queer. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. So currently, Andy, I reside in Wanaka in the South Island, in the mountains, which is a glorious place to live. I've lived here just over 4 years now, and I moved here with my family. So my husband, James, and my two kids, Harry and Betsy, we moved from Sydney, where we had lived for a long time, although I am actually English originally. But I've nearly lived away from England as long as I lived there, I guess. So I'm kind of like been Antipodean for half my life, and before that, British. So our move to Wanaka was really a desire, I guess, to have a new experience for our family and to potentially get out of the rat race that was Sydney. And I had a real long-standing affiliation with New Zealand. I first came here after I finished school in my late teens and ended up in Queenstown and fell in love with it a little bit. So I guess I've found a full way back in the end.
Yeah, nice.
So so we love living here, and my professional background was actually kind of a bit of a Jill of all trades, or Jack of all trades, Jill of all trades, in small business ownership and in various different industries, but also always did a lot of volunteer work as well. And when I moved to New Zealand, it was really a time for me to think carefully about what I really wanted to do and what my heart was telling me to do rather than my head. So I made a move, a very purposeful move into working more into the sort of social services and charitable sector, which has led me to my current role with Good Bitches Baking as the general manager. I've been in this role now just over a year.
Nice. And what sort of businesses were you involved in?
So one, I was involved in telecommunications, which I'll be honest, just bored me to tears. It was my husband's business and he needed a wingman, a business wingman. So we did that business together for 10 years. It was a full service telco business, but like any small business, I think you have to wear lots of different hats, right? And you get to be quite good at a bunch of different things, and they're very transferable. And then I went on to have my children, and then had a couple of years sort of having a bit of time out with them, and then started an online retail business. Again, it was a kind of a work from home business. So it was that dilemma of wanting to do something purposeful with life, make some money, and be the mum and do all the things. So it definitely ticked that box.
Yeah. Well, that's essentially the space that we've found ourselves in. Beck started our business for the same sort of reasons, that she was at home. She'd been doing a sort of a wedding cake business as well, but it was paying for itself, but it was more about keeping her sane and giving her some creativity outside of parenting.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then started Sugar Lips as a business to give her that same sort of balance that you're talking about, and then I get to come in as the wingman on that one. So
Yeah.
So now we do that together. But yeah, oh, that's really cool.
And it is that dilemma, right? You sort of, there has to be compromise. You actually can't really have it all. Well, you can't have it all at the same time, right? So, looking back, I would never have changed that. My kids are getting older now, early teens, and they still need you, but they need you in a different way. So I guess that's freed up my head and time a bit more to refocus as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like you said, you're now the general manager of Good Bitches Baking. I first encountered it through obviously Bex and I running Sugar Lips, which is a baking and cake decorating supplies business. And it turned out that a number of our customers were some of your volunteers.
Yeah.
And so that's how kind of we first got introduced to it. And actually that's led Bex to being a volunteer now too, which has been great. So I've learned a little bit about it through that. But for those who don't know about it, can you tell us a bit about what is Good Bitches Baking and how did you come to be involved?
Yeah, sure. So the charity was founded in 2014 in Wellington by two Wellington women, Nick Murray and Marie Fitzpatrick. They were two friends, and I guess they were sort of, well, story goes they were out in a bar having ruminating on the world and kind of seeing a lot of, pretty not great things in their own communities, but also that dilemma of how do we help, how do we do something? And sometimes, societal issues and things seem so much bigger than you. And you're always thinking, well, what, if I could do one thing, what could that be for me? And how the sort of concept evolved was this idea that on your darkest day, whatever that looks like for you, that a very small gesture of kindness might be the thing that gets you through that day when maybe you thought you couldn't. And to be able to deliver that in a tangible way, I guess baking is something that people can do, but that food is love, right? So then the challenge was, okay, so if we've got this concept of how we can deliver moments of sweetness, as we call them, to complete strangers, how do we go about scaling that up? And I guess that's where the idea came that maybe they could ask their mates if anyone was keen, and before they knew it, they popped something on Facebook and it just went off.
Yeah,
it went off, and so that was the founding of the first chapter, which was Wellington, which now some 8 years later has 500 volunteers, and then we spread our wings from there. So we now across the country, both in the North and South Island, have a collective of 29 chapters. So our furthest north chapter is in Whangarei, and our furthest south is in Invercargill, and then we have everything in between. And basically our model of how we run the organisation is that we have so our volunteers, as you mentioned, that we fondly refer to as our good bitches. So they're our home volunteers who either bake or drive or do both. And then what we do is we partner with what we call recipient organisations across the country. So currently, volunteers-wise, we have around 2,900 good bitches or volunteers, and we partner with nearly 350 organisations, and those organisations range. We work with people like refuges, food bank, hospice, sexual violence support organisations, gender minorities, night shelters, NICU. And the one thing those recipient organisations all have in common is that in lots of different ways, they're all supporting people who are going through a tough time. And that's our delivery model. So it's sort of the bakers go onto our very sophisticated rostering system that was custom built for us, called fondly known as the BMS, which stands for the Bitch Management System. And it's super fancy. It's got some serious algorithm that runs through there so that we can do our best job to match up our volunteers' availability, locations, all these different nuances with where our recipients are located, so they get matched up with a date and time and recipient to do their baking for. It gets delivered to the recipients, and they then go and share that with the people that use their services. So it's a really simple model, but it's a really effective one. So much so that last calendar year, we delivered over around nearly 22,000 white boxes. So that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
And I guess the other unique thing about our model a bit is, volunteers are key to any charitable organisation. They're often the lifeblood, but our volunteers also contribute financially to their own ingredients, fuel, other consumables that are needed to create the baking, and that's a huge cost that we wouldn't be able to sustain ourselves. So yeah, we sort of put a value of about $90 onto a box of baking by the time you've accounted for volunteer time and all those other bits and pieces. So that's nearly around $2 million of voluntary contribution through Good Bitches, which is pretty rad. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, if you were going and buying that from a bakery to then give to someone,
yeah.
that cost is getting up, isn't it?
Yeah, and then that's the whole thing, right? Like, there's often some unreal things that get put into our chapter Facebook groups, but the whole idea of being a good bitch is it's not if it's fancy, it's just the idea that you've created something from your heart at home in your own kitchen to give to someone else. It's kind of that beacon of hope,
Yeah.
right? So, as much as there is a little competition out there, we're not about the competition.
Yeah.
We're just
Yeah.
about the doing the thing, right? Whatever that looks like for you. We have heaps of our volunteers who get their kids involved, whether to do the baking, decorate the boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I was gonna say that our 4-year-old has had a great time decorating the
Mm,
boxes,
yeah,
and I think we've had more comments on his decorating of the box than we have on the baking that we've delivered.
yeah, but that
So
says a
yeah,
lot, right? Because even that decoration, it's the sentiment behind it, and that's the
yeah,
thing about this charity. I think a lot of our individual volunteers sometimes don't see what they're doing as a big deal, but that collectiveness has a huge impact, and it often is entirely unexpected by the people who receive the baking. We hear often comments um, about people feeling seen and valued, often in a community where they don't usually get that opportunity for whatever their circumstance might be. And it's such a simple thing, right? But if you have that
yeah,
impact, like how cool is that? Yeah. And in terms of how I got involved, as I said earlier when you asked me, I dabbled in a few different charitable organisations since I moved here, and I saw this role come up, and of course I was struck by the name, like many people are. Right, it's memorable, it's fun, it's sassy, but with good intent. The idea that it's people that roll their sleeves up. Will do the best they can possibly do, and the whole concept of the organisation and how it came about had really really appealed to me.
yeah,
Um, and I guess this whole small business thing, being a general manager of a small charity, you wear a lot of hats, right? You have to be pretty good at a bunch of different stuff. So that ticked a whole load of my boxes as well, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. For some people, having a more specialized role in a bigger thing would be their thing,
Mm.
but for other people, actually having this thing where you get to do a lot of different bits and pieces, and that's one thing I love about working alongside Bex in our small businesses. One minute I'm bagging sprinkles,
Yeah.
and the next minute I'm doing accounting, but then the next minute I'm helping with some marketing creative idea, and then I'm getting in touch with our charities that we support through it, and it's just a diverse thing that for me again ticks the boxes like you're saying. So I totally get that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think because as well, just like with any small business, like you mentioned, because well, we've been around for a while now. We're still a relatively young charity, and also relatively small. Certainly in terms of our internal staff. I mean, there's only 3 of us in this organisation that are in any kind of a paid capacity. That 2 part timers, myself, who works full time, and beyond that, we sort of rely on the expertise of a bunch of different people, and that honestly blows me away. Sometimes we'll need a hand with some particular thing, and we don't have the skill set, and we use some great resources now to find people that want to volunteer with you for a specialist skill set. And sometimes I can't believe the people that are like throwing their hat in the ring and saying, "Hey, we'll help you out with that," and I'm like, "Excellent." You
Yeah.
had no idea how to do that, and so
Yeah.
it's amazing the people that jump on board and help you, not only with the baking and delivering side of what we do, but also all the other what we call our HQ activities as well, which are all needed to keep us moving forward and being innovative as a charity as well. So yeah, it's very cool.
You mentioned the name, and that's obviously something that, like, when you encounter the organization, that's the first thing that hits you. I guess what's the thinking behind the name,
Mm.
and what does it mean to you?
Yeah. Well, so when Nick and Marie founded the charity, I think they'd sort of thought that maybe Nick and Marie's baking circle wasn't going to sort of have the impact that they were hoping. And I think that was the truth of
Yeah.
it. It was just about trying to do something that would be get their attention. But I think also it was an opportunity to challenge and push boundaries. The idea being that a good bitch is very much, in our opinion, it's a gender neutral term. It's around the ethos of the person and their attitude towards life. It's often said that people don't think twice about calling someone a good bastard or a whatever. It's almost like a term of high praise in that sense, and we view this the same. The idea that if you're willing to to dig your heels in and do something good for other people, that does make you a good bitch. And also, it's about reclaiming it. Traditionally, we actually have on our website a whole little section on there about how the word came to being, how the word bitch came to being, and what and how that was all tied. What its origins were tied to. So it's about reclaiming and turning something that's traditionally been used in a negative way, kind of into.
Yeah, I was reading all that. That was fascinating. Like
Yeah,
linked to the suffrage movement
yeah,
and people who are opposed to that, and
yeah,
it's like, wow, that's when you start to look at it, it's actually got some really negative origins.
yeah,
And
exactly.
so for you to be able to turn that on its head, I think
Yeah.
is really amazing.
And look, like with anything in life, if you push the envelope and you choose to push it a little bit of a boundary, there'll always be um people that have opinions, right? They do about everything in life, but overwhelmingly the
Yeah,
name is the name. We're not changing it. We're proud of it, and as are the vast majority of the people who support us. We have plenty of corporate partners and grant makers who fund our work, and obviously volunteers. So we love it. And my kids like to say it now a lot at home, because if they put good in front of me, I've got no issue. So
yeah, right. We're at the stage where we can talk about it with the girls. We aren't saying it in front of the 4-year-olds because we don't want him going to kindy and calling his teachers that in out of context
yeah, there's always
situation.
context is
So
everything in life. Isn't it?
yeah,
With
totally.
anything, yes, quite.
But I really liked actually on the website. There's a particular part where you're talking about the name and you say that you're inviting people, and I'm quoting here, to examine why they're so offended and to perhaps reconsider their thinking. And I thought about that and went, that's just a really good life practice.
Mm.
That when we get offended, to actually just stop and go, well, what is it that is offending me? And where is that coming from? And is that telling me something about me? And I mean, you might end up in a place where you're like, look, I still don't like the name. And that's fine. But I just think that's a great piece of advice to go, hey, let's just stop and have a think here rather than just reacting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I quite agree with you. Yeah.
You said you've grown from that first chapter up to 29 chapters throughout the country. That's like an incredible amount of growth in like you say, quite a small amount of time overall.
Yeah.
What would you put that growth down to?
Yeah, look, I think very much in the beginning. In the beginning, it was Nick and Marie's exceptional hard work. Not only were they working in their own full-time careers with their own families, but having this awesome idea and then just wanting it to grow. So I think there was a lot of people that that they encouraged in their own networks and people they knew in different geographies. But I think this is probably where it comes down to the name, right? I think the name helped them get a lot of good press initially and a lot of visibility, in the marketplace a little bit. So, and the other thing I think they worked really hard on as a charity initially, and it's something that I've been super impressed with since I've started, is just how well set up the charity was in terms of its operational procedures, so that when you wanted to grow, there was a sort of a format to do that. So it wasn't, it was easily replicated, if you like.
Yeah.
And things like this bitch management system, this BMS system, was a work in progress for 5 years of actually one of the
Well,
founders' husbands who did that, and probably wished he'd never offered initially. But now we've created
yeah.
this thing that really has made the organisation scalable. I mean, before we had this, there were some of the larger chapters. They had volunteers that were spending up to 20 hours a month on rostering these volunteers and matching up needs and requirements.
Wow.
So it was pretty crazy. So I think it's probably partly that those operational tools that are supporting the business, and I think just the idea being that the concept's quite simple, so it's not too
Yeah.
overwhelming. So I guess if we're looking to go into a new area, there's a few things we'd need to look at. So things like, do we have ideal recipient organisations that are in this particular area? Is there, is there a large enough population, or does the geography support the model so that there's recipients that are based not too far away from where people live or work, those kinds of things. But I think really it was just the idea that it's also simple in practice. I think part of the challenge for volunteer organisations these days, with a lot of people in full-time work or having lots of other things that they do in their life, is how you get that commitment of volunteers ongoing. And I think this model works well for that, because you do as little or as much as you like, in the sense that if you can bake once a month, great. If you can bake every week, great. But that's sort of your commitment. That's where it starts and that's where it ends, as opposed to, say, having to show up at a place on every Wednesday from 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Say that's not often very realistic for people. So I think it's the flexibility of the volunteer model that's worked really well for growth. And at the end of the day, again, just relying on awesome people who are willing to maybe step up into one of those volunteer leadership roles and lead or support in a chapter committee. Again, those guys are the lifeblood of this organisation. They understand the communities they live in. They understand the challenges that maybe their volunteers face, because parts of the country are really different, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all. If you're in central Auckland, it's very different to if you're in Oamaru or somewhere else. It's a totally different community, different needs, and it's that local intel, I think, that's essential as well. But I think it's the simplicity more than anything that supported the growth. Simple to start and to start a chapter, but also simple to attract people into the model to contribute as well.
I really like that in terms of thinking about other people who have ideas of good things they could be doing. I really like that thought that, let's make this simple thing, but let's still have good systems around it, so that it works and that it doesn't become something that we can't manage.
Yeah.
I think also the fact that, like, you're now in the organisation as the general manager, and Nick and Marie aren't having to feel like they need to be the general managers or anything like that. Again, that's a really good model, that there are people that have ideas and get things up and running, and there are other people who come along and help keep it running and keep it going, and that's actually really healthy. And I think some people don't start things because they're worried that, well, then I'm going to have all this thing that I'm going to have to carry forever. But it's not always like that, is it?
No, I think it's not. And I think, so Nick and Marie were involved for a very long time, and they've both now stepped away completely. And we also now have, we're a charitable trust, so we have a charitable board. So we have 6 board members now that truly can be governing board members. So they're focused on governance and strategy. They're not trying to do all the operational bits and pieces. So we also now have resource as well. So apart from myself, we have Hannah, who works part-time as our marketing and communications manager, and another lady, Nat, who's our operations manager now. So I think those core skill sets, and along with mine, really, they all complement each other, but it just means we have more resource, right, and more time. Because I think, like you said before, with any charity that starts, the goodwill and intention is there, but then when it snowballs like it did with GBB, it can get overwhelming. So many great ideas, but how do you execute them all? Then where do you find the money from, and all that kind of thing? In fact, I read the other day that apparently per head globally, New Zealand has more charities than anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
I think it's one charity per 168 people, I believe I read. Don't quote me on that, but it's more than that.
That's phenomenal, though.
Yeah. So and of those, a lot in terms of how the Charities Commission would rank them, they'd be tier 4 charities, so not turning over that much financially, but they all have the same challenges, right? We've got this, and just like these guys, right? This charity was founded on a great idea, and then it was, okay, how do we systemize this thing? How do we make it into a proper business? How do we grow it? And I think that's the challenge for a lot of charities, particularly those that rely on volunteers or voluntary committees, that kind of thing. Sometimes hard to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think knowing when it's time to hand over to someone else is actually really crucial. And there have been charities that have got up and running on good intentions and good ideas, and then after a while, those that started it have ended up overwhelmed, and then it's kind of fizzled out. Whereas being able to do what Nick and Marie have done, of going, hey, we're going to be involved, we're going to do a lot of work. It sounds like they work their butts off, but then they also knew when it was time for them to step away for whatever reasons and to hand over to other people. And I think that's a really healthy model for others to look at and go, oh, right, we can do that too. You say on the website, for us, baking is a vehicle for talking about kindness. And then I love in your vision and your mission, and it goes back to that conversation that you said that Nick and Marie were having in the first place, that in your mission and your vision, you don't even actually mention baking because it is the vehicle, it's not the purpose.
Yeah.
And so I'll read out the mission and vision. It says, we want to make Aotearoa the kindest place on earth. And then the vision is, kindness is redemptive to everyone involved. Everyone deserves to receive kindness. Everyone can benefit from the opportunity to be kind. I mean, my first thought is it seems really simple when you put it like that. That actually this is just about kindness.
Yeah. I mean, that's it, right? It is just baking's the vehicle. It's an easy vehicle. It's a tangible vehicle. It is simple, and that's kind of the beauty of it. And I think some of we're actually just working at the moment on, we got some funding towards the end of last year to do a research project, and we're just in the midst of doing that now. And one of the things we're looking at in that research project is how we actually close that circle of kindness. So how do people who've been shown kindness, how do they themselves get the opportunity to then be able to show that to others? And the idea being that, if we can close that circle, that will increase and promote resilience and compassion within communities. And it doesn't have to be complicated, but oftentimes it is about the opportunity. So some of the things we're working on at the moment, aside from our BAU, our business as usual, as we call it, which is this delivery to recipient model, we're looking at how what other things we can do. And again, some of these concepts that we're trialing are not complicated, but they're of the same sort of ilk. So one of the things we're doing, we loosely call it collaborative bitching. So it's the idea that in actual fact, some of our recipients are now themselves becoming a group volunteer. So I'll give you a good example of that one. So last year, myself and our head bitch from our Wellington chapter went to do a workshop at a teen parent unit in the Hutt Valley. And we did a workshop with the girls. It was really fun. We did some baking with them, had some chats around kindness. And they were already a recipient of ours. So on Monday morning, they receive a box of baking to share amongst themselves. And now they've taken the step to come onto our roster themselves. So they're now becoming a collaborative bitch. And they now are going to be baking for another organisation in their own community as well.
That's so good.
And it's sometimes just giving people that chance, right? You don't know what you don't know, or maybe you just don't have the opportunity, or maybe you've grown up in an environment where kindness wasn't apparent in your life. You have to have been shown something to be able to experience it and then be able to give it. So there's lots of other things that we're working on like that. Also, thinking outside of that box, sort of trying to target people who maybe don't have the opportunity or the time to be kind. So another concept we're working on is something we're calling business bitching, and that's where we're looking to partner with the corporate, the corporate world. So a lot of corporates now are thinking about how they can be more proactive with their social and corporate responsibility. And oftentimes, executives or people in busy roles, maybe they don't have time to volunteer in a traditional sense, but this is still maybe giving them that opportunity to dabble and see what that feels like. And hey, if they like it, maybe they'll come on as a regular volunteer. So it's about just giving people those opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And another thing we're just restarting, we had, obviously we all enjoyed COVID for a couple of years where a lot of things got put on hold. One of the initiatives that we'd started prior to COVID was a program called Prison Bake, where we had some of our volunteers go into prisons to work with prisoners, again on a 6-week baking program, giving them a taster of learning a new skill, sure, but also the most impactful part of that program was that the baking that the participants did that also went back out into their own communities and was given to recipients. So we're just kicking off that program again with a couple of prisons this year, and we hope to do that, with more. So again, this idea that everyone, what we said in terms of everyone has, that opportunity to be kind, and everyone deserves to receive kindness. So it's kind of like it's still baking, but slightly differently, but still, that
And
concept.
top marks on the name too. Prison Baker's excellent.
Yeah, that was a Nick and Marie special,
Yeah.
and it is easy to sometimes say prison break
Break.
by
Yeah.
accident. More often than not, in fact, yes.
Yeah. Oh no, that's gold. But no, what a great use of a vehicle of baking to teach kindness and to show kindness, kind of all in the same space. And like you're saying, to give the opportunity to be kind, and that those things all kind of go hand in hand. And yet baking is just a very simple idea when it
Mhm.
comes down to it. So no, that's really beautiful.
And I think on that as well, I think sometimes our volunteers get so blown away by the feedback they hear from our recipients because for them, often our volunteers have, not all of them, of course, but so many of them have probably taken kindness a bit for granted, right? That they've never not been shown it and they've never not been able to give it. So the idea that, there's plenty of people in this country and all over the world, of course, but who never have had that.
Yeah.
We do a sort of a recipient survey every year where we sort of survey all our recipients on what we do and how we can do it better and the impact that our work has on the people they work with. And it often, it blows you away some of the things that you hear. I remember last year I had a little bit of a tear up, I will say, when one of the feedback was just something simple like this: receiving this baking, this must be how it feels like when you have a mum, you know.
Oh
And I
wow.
was just like, oh, geez, like, yes, I mean,
Wow.
and so,
Yeah.
and this is the thing, like, when these volunteers read this, or we often get, private, messages to our Facebook group. Some we get quite a lot actually, is we have a lot of mums and dads who have little premature babies in NICUs, and we work with quite a lot of NICUs across the country. And they'll say things like, we've been here for 2 months now, or whatever, and you guys have no idea how much joy it is when we come into that, family room and we see the white boxes there with the note. You guys have no idea.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, what an impact it makes. Pretty cool.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because like the whole idea that kindness is redemptive to everyone involved, it's really easy for people who have good ideas about being generous or being kind to end up in that kind of savior complex
Mm.
kind of thing where you feel like, well, we're the ones who are going in and doing the kindness, but actually what I'm hearing from you is that actually in doing that, people themselves are receiving something back, and that it's like a mutual showing of kindness and a mutual learning and a mutual growing.
Yeah,
Is that your experience?
yeah, I think definitely, and also the idea that that we provide this baking or this service, whatever you want to call it, or this thing that we do with absolutely no judgment. So that people are having a tough time for all kinds of reasons, and that
Yeah.
we don't judge why they are or what their
Yeah.
situation is. It is what it is, and this is something small that that we can do. But I think the other thing is when we think about okay, this is a thing like an organization that people are part of to do this, demonstrative showing of kindness, as you say. But I think some of the, a lot of the things, it can be a small thing. It's just like saying hi to someone, right? Or paying them a compliment, or it's a small thing. We're not saying it has to be this big thing where you join an organization to do it, but let's just do more of it. I think the irony is, right, an organization like this, maybe we could have argued that generations ago, this just happened, right? This stuff just happened. Like communities looked out for each other, and of course they still do. Don't get me wrong. People are
Yeah.
still helping people all the time, but in a way, just the nature of if you think about things like urban settings where often people now are living in apartments or they're living in housing situations where maybe even the opportunity to meet their neighbours or the people around them is not easy to do because of those living circumstances, or it's taken away maybe a lot of those organic opportunities to promote and show kindness to each other. So I think yeah, I think and I think also, maybe when you do the thing that you do. So, if we go and do workshops with young people, I went to I've done a couple of these where you have no idea actually if the thing you're doing is having an impact, but it doesn't matter because maybe it'll happen in 5-10 years. Maybe it'll be just the fact that someone had that opportunity and then they remember it when they're in a place to remember it or act on it or show kindness themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, not everything you do has to have maximum impact, does it?
No. And the idea is with kindness, the whole idea, the whole principle of it, right, is that you don't expect anything in return.
It's funny. It sounds a lot like podcasting, actually, because
Putting it out to the world, not sure what's going to happen. Yeah.
I just think that whole focus on kindness, and like you're saying, it doesn't mean that everyone has to join Good Bitches Baking in order to be kind.
No.
But actually, if we could all just bring a bit more kindness into the world, what a better place we would have, I just think that's great. And even thinking what you were saying about the living situations that people are in, we live up a driveway and it's a shared driveway and there's 2 units on one side and 2 on the other. And it wasn't that long ago that one of the neighbors came over and said, I've just started baking a cake, but I don't have any cocoa. I thought I had some. Do you have some? And I just went, this is amazing. Like, this is what it should be like.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. It's for so many people. It's not for a whole host of reasons. But yeah, that also, one of the things I like about what you're doing is that you're trying to take barriers down from people being able to be involved and be kind. And so, like you talked about, you've got some people who are just drivers. They don't do the baking, but they're happy to deliver it. But also, I noticed on the website you've got a thing called the Cup of Sugar program.
Yeah.
Do you want to just describe that a little bit? Because that's this whole idea of taking down the barriers, isn't it?
Yeah, so the Cup of Sugar program is a program where we received donations that go into this Cup of Sugar program, and its intention is that is there as a fund to be used by anyone who would like to be a good bitch and contribute in the way our model works, but they have a financial barrier to doing so. So the idea being they can email at any time, and then we organise a supermarket voucher for them, which gets sent to them so that they can go themselves and choose what they want to bake and have all top. We don't just send them a bunch of stuff, like go and choose what they want to make, and they too can participate. Because as I mentioned before, I guess financially we'd sort of be out of business pretty quickly if we provided the ingredients for all our volunteers. We just couldn't do that. But we don't want, to your point, we don't ever want something like a financial barrier to be an issue, which has been telling after things like COVID and things like that, when people's circumstances changed a lot. And actually, just things like we have, just thinking about the cyclone that's just happened recently in the North Island. We have 2 chapters, one in Gisborne and one in Napier Hastings as well. So we've been doing a little bit of extra support for those guys, just to help them out. The resilience, unbelievable. I mean, in Napier Hastings, I think 2 days after the cyclone hit, one of our committee members was pretty much sitting on the top of a hill with a laptop trying to get some reception so she could message our operations manager to help her modify the roster, because unsurprisingly a few of our volunteers couldn't get it, but they were still very concerned that their baking may or may not get there, and now they're all back baking where they can. And I mean, again, like, unbelievable. The head bitch up there, she's buddied up some people, because a few people in that chapter that have either got severe damage at home or have lost their homes, and just looking out for each other, even within this community of good bitches. Their good bitching's going way beyond the thing they're there to do. It's just this idea of looking out for each other, and again, showing kindness, right, in any way you can.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, it is. They don't call us good bitches for no reason, Andy.
Yeah, totally. So where to from here for Katy Rowden and Good Bitches Baking?
Oof, well, I mean, I'm thoroughly enjoying this role. As I said, I'm only about 14 months into it. What I love about, I guess, this charity being smaller is that there's lots of opportunity to play and be innovative and try new things. I guess we're not so big that we've got a lot of, bureaucracy and red tape. So, some of the things that I'll be focused on in the next year or so will be thinking, how do we maximise our current model of business? So are there strategic or geographic areas where we might be able to set up a new chapter, or, if we can't for whatever reason, but there's still need, what other innovative ways can we come up with to support people there? So we'll be sort of looking at that and working on some of these programs that I mentioned in terms of closing this circle of kindness and really getting, remove, like you said, further removing those barriers so people can participate in whatever way suits them, and we can help facilitate that. And in terms of, in terms of me personally, it's just awesome to be involved in a charity. Not only that you get to talk about cake and kindness and doing good things every day, but also, how awesome that I get to sit here in this part of the world we've chosen to come and live in and still get to contribute. I guess that kind of has been a positive from COVID for some people, that remote work is becoming more acceptable, where we can't get to a physical place of work and all those advantages. So that's that's great to be working with an organisation that supports and promotes that for the people that work with them. So yeah, I think there's just lots and lots of cool things happening, and and can't wait to get stuck in, really. Yeah, sure. So the best place is to go straight to our website, which is www.gbb.org.nz, and they'll see a big button there, both to volunteer. So if you are keen to find out more about volunteering or become a volunteer, you can simply drop down a menu there and see which chapters we have around the country, see if there's one near you, and sign up that way. Similarly, we're about to go live actually with a new, the exact same process for recipients. They can go on there as well and find out if they might be able to receive baking for their organisation if they're supporting people having a tough time. If you'd love to make a donation to us, either to our Cup of Sugar program or elsewhere, there's also a donate button on there. And follow us on social media as well, either on Instagram or Facebook.
Well, thank you so much, Katy, for having a chat with us today. Thank you for everything that Good Bitches Baking stands for. I think it's such a beacon of light for people to just see this amount of kindness, and just how easy it can be to be kind and to make a difference in people's lives. So thank you for all you're doing. Thank you if you're listening to this and you're one of the good bitches, thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
That's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and for giving us the opportunity to share our mahi with you.
Hello, hello heaven. Will I hear you whisper to come near?
I have to admit that when Katy told us about the person who thought this must be what it's like to have a mum, I nearly cried. What a profound impact with such a simple act. I think the word I came back to most in this discussion, other than the word bitches of course, which I think I said more in this episode than the rest of my life combined, was the word simple. Kindness isn't complicated. And we can all give kindness. And what a better world we would have if we all focused on doing that every day. Katy, it was a real pleasure to talk to you and to hear about the amazing work you and the GBB team are doing. Thank you for who you are and what you do. Here is a blessing for you. Katy, may you continue to thrive in and enjoy your role at Good Bitches Baking, championing the mission of kindness, and may you see the fruit of all your mahi. As your children see you live a life founded on kindness and goodness, may those values be instilled in them also, shaping them as they grow to be people who know the importance of kindness and who readily give and receive it as they go about their everyday lives. May GBB continue to grow, and may you find new ways to use the resources available to do good in the world. And as you do, may you know the difference you are making in our country, in the lives of so many individuals and families. May your good bitches receive as much kindness as they give, seeing the fruit of their planting seeds of kindness as that kindness grows into much more than they could have ever imagined that it could be. May their cups of sugar overflow and their pantries ever be full, that kindness may continue to pour out of their kitchens, showering kindness on those who need it most. And finally, Katy and all your good bitches, may you know you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thanks to Strawn for the music and Rangi for the karakia. Join me next time when I talk to theologian and In the Shift podcast host Michael Frost. We talk about infertility, dealing with life and faith going off script, being an ally to the queer community, and processing with those hurt by various church structures and experiences. It's a rich and healing kōrero. Until then, me inoi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Homai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Muro o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia. Engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino.